In World War II, Switzerland didn't actually do a whole lot, so today I have decided to show all of you how World War II would have played out if Switzerland had joined the Allies and fought back against the Axis. Stick around to the end and enjoy as I attempt to liberate Europe as Switzerland in Hearts of Iron 4. But now you may be curious, how exactly am I going to become strong enough to take on the entirety of the Axis when, with no offence intended, I am literally Switzerland? Like, not to be that guy, but I literally have only 12 factories, and I'm also unable to train any decent divisions because of my forced conscription laws. While the path to success lies in the focus tree as usual. The first focuses we need to do starts with Swiss guiding principles and ends with ban foreign Nazi propaganda. Doing these focuses will open up our tree to the specific branch that we need, and the first focus in that tree is called Allied Gold. From Allied Gold, we will work our way down, allowing us to supercharge our nation. Now that you know the plan, all that is left to do is to put everything into action. Okay, as with any save, I first started constructing infrastructure, factories, and begun the training of the 15 militia divisions that I am allowed. However, the most important thing that I did as I worked down the focus tree was saving up all of my political power, so that when needed to, I could pick advisors that gave unaligned support and click buttons that pushed the balance of power to the left of the scale. This may not seem that important for now, but eventually this will be really important for when the focuses in my tree require certain support levels for the different political parties in Switzerland. One thing I did have to be careful of, however, is how France, Germany and Italy thought of me in the decisions tab. If any of these numbers gets below -90, these three nations may declare war on me, and that would really put a hole in my plans. It is now time for the results of the focus press for Vorarlberg. Perfect! The Austrians folded under zero pressure, and I managed to grow because of it. Let's hope that this lucky streak continues for the rest of the game. After preempting the Anschluss, I managed to annex the entirety of Austria, giving me access to not only Austria's divisions, but also their industry. And what can I say? Things were going amazingly. The French gave me the entirety of their half of the Alps, and all that was left was for the Italians to do the same. Plot twist, the Italians did not do the same, so now I have to reset the run. But don't worry though, I'll do a time skip to get back to where I was, so that you guys don't get too bored. And there we have it, success. We now have 58 factories and tons of mountains that we can easily defend when war comes. The final thing we must now do is forming the Alpine Protectorate. With this, we will now have transcended into Switzerland's final form, a form that is hopefully strong enough to take on the Axis. In fact, taking on the Axis sounds like a fun thing to do. So, I upped my mobilization to war economy and my conscription laws to extensive conscription. I then spent until 1941 preparing for my entrance into the war. Oh yeah, I also chose to get some doctrines, and in the end, I landed on the doctrine mobile warfare. Just before this war starts, I should probably show you the template I am running for my infantry. It's not much, just a normal infantry block that I will gradually add extra artillery battalions to as my industry grows. And then finally, the defensive positions I hope to hold are here. The general rule of thumb I used to select these lines was, is there a river, a mountain, or supply hub? I just followed those three rules and I was set. The Axis had now started Operation Barbarossa, and, more importantly, they were losing. This means that the Axis had to overcommit in the east, tying down a large number of divisions, leaving them ready to be invaded. The war had now started, and I chose to make the first move. I pushed into Mulheim, hoping to push into Freiburg and Strasbourg. However, the Germans were not going to allow this to happen so easily, as they chose to redeploy divisions from their crumbling front line to mine. Thankfully, however, the Germans had blundered. They didn't reinforce the region near Bescanon quickly enough, allowing me to pierce their ranks and attempt an encirclement. I was able to push into France quickly and deeply, with the hopes of reverting their capitulation. Unfortunately, however, this was simply too arrogant of a play, as the Germans managed to spawn new divisions out of thin air containing my push. And this is where I highlight the single biggest weakness of Switzerland. Because of our government type being unaligned, we were never able to get onto the higher conscription levels when not at war. This means we were never able to really build up a big enough army that could facilitate really deep pushes into enemy territory. All we could do was hold our line and hope the Germans whittled themselves down. Sadly, in the north I was being pushed back, so I retreated behind the river line where I would have an easier time playing on the defence. The same story was also occurring in the west, in the liberated areas of France. The Germans had begun to dogpile my already outnumbered divisions, pushing me back further and further as the days went on. The Germans were not the only ones who were giving me issues, as on the Italian line, the Italians had pierced down by Genoa. As I only had a limited number of divisions, I could not effectively contain this push, leading to the near compromisation of my access to the sea, and therefore my allies. The Italians had, however, made a mistake. They had pushed too far and too quickly, meaning their front line was fairly thin, allowing for an encirclement of all of the divisions that they had used to invade me. However, before I could finish off this encirclement, something much more important happened in the northeast of my country. That's right, the Yugoslavians, or I should say the Germans on Yugoslavian soil. I don't actually know how this happened, as I wasn't really paying attention, but to remedy the situation, I chose to fall back to behind the Alps, as this would shrink and thicken my front line simultaneously. And here we are, the first Italian encirclement followed by a second one. These encirclements are important as they greatly reduce the strength of the offensive Italians, allowing me to solidify my lines and push back up to Genoa when the time is right. That time is not right now though, as the Germans were making advancements in the north, pushing directly onto land that I hadn't gained through focuses. This means my capital was now being threatened. And the Germans did not take no for an answer. They tag-teamed my capital with the help of the Italians and eventually took it. This was a dark day for the Alpine Protectorate. Also, little side note, I had no idea that Bern was the capital of Switzerland. I always thought it was Zurich. But anyway, back to the important bit of the game. My capital was lost. I was way too close to capitulation for my liking. This is either going to go really well from here, or really bad. Thankfully, however, Stalin was beyond locked in. I had never seen him perform so well against the Axis before in my life. With his advancements in the east, and hopefully my sturdy front line in the south, we may actually have a chance at this. All we need to do is wait for Germany to wear themselves out. Not massively worried about Italy. You know, it's Italy. But if Germany wears itself out, we actually have a chance at this. Okay, so you know things are looking good when you're pretty much only seeing green. And just because I do need to pad out this commentary a little more, it was so weird just how instantaneous the shift was in the enemy's fighting strength. One day I was only seeing red and was getting pushed off of every single tile I chose to stand on. But now they can't even throw a punch at me. I don't know if it was the Soviets helping out quite a bit with weakening them down, or something like that, but it was just really weird to see, because it was genuinely like night and day the shift was. It has now been one whole year of whittling the Germans down, and more importantly, the Brits and the Americans have both started to reinforce my front lines. This is the moment that I have been waiting for throughout this entire save. Now that they had started to reinforce my lines, it was the beginning of the end for the Germans, as now I did not have to worry about losing my entrenchment or my organisation, as even if my attacks failed, I could use my allies as a safety net to ensure that our original front line was being held. This allowed me to make deep pushes up towards Slovakia, back into Austria to retake the fallen lands that I once held. The Germans were now crumbling, and it was a beautiful sight to see. What's more, the fact that my allies were finally here also helped in another problem, and that problem was the issue with a lack of divisions. Now that allied divisions were finally here on the front line, I could confidently push into enemy territories without the fear of having thinned my front lines too much to the point of them getting pierced by the enemy. And there we go. Vienna had fallen into my hands once more. Now you may be thinking that this isn't particularly important. However, you have to remember one thing. The land that I am currently taking from the Germans is not foreign soil. It is my core territory, meaning as I take more and more of this land, I will be gaining more and more manpower and more factories, allowing me to eventually snowball into an absolute superpower. And what's more, taking Vienna gives me a board with Hungary. A Hungary that had already been beaten back by the Soviets multiple times, meaning I get to gobble up loads of free, undefended land that was ripe for the taking. The Allies also managed to pull off an incredibly successful D-Day in Belgium, not only allowing for the liberation of both Belgium and the Netherlands, but also the creation of a brand new front line. The Germans now had 5 entire front lines to worry about. They were overextended, undersupplied and demoralised. It was now only a matter of time until they capitulated. Our victories were not exclusive to Germany, as I also managed to cut Italy in half with one large push through their lines. From this push, I simultaneously pushed to the north and to the south, leading to their eventual capitulation. We had now defeated one out of the two major Axis nations, so now all I had to do was steamroll Germany and I will have won World War II as the Alpine Protectorate. But before taking out Germany, I chose to clean up the Balkans. I got a very nice encirclement in the first part of my cleanup operation, and from there it was smooth sailing. Now, it may look like I'm glossing over the final battles of this war, but I promise you I'm not. The Axis are simply so weak that there was literally no cool looking battles going on. I was walking into their territory after this encirclement and just taking it. It was now finally Germany's time to die, and I'm so confident in their capitulation that I don't even think bitter steel could bring this one back for them. Sadly, however, before I could even get a single battle done against the Germans, they capitulated. I don't know how they capitulated so fast, but the Allies must have been on something else. Obviously you've got the Soviets that were destroying them, but the UK just pulled something out in the last minute to completely destroy them. Anyway, for the peace deal, I took as much of Italy and Yugoslavia as I possibly could. Surprisingly, I didn't actually get as many victory points as I thought I would. I thought I would be getting way more since I'd been in the war from the very start, battling the Germans and the Italians constantly, but no. That final push the Allies did into Germany probably earned them a lot of the victory points, which greatly reduced my power in the peace deal. I also don't know why I got that part of the Rhineland. I never asked for it, but I'll take it if it's free. But there you are. I have now liberated Europe as the Alpine Protectorate. I genuinely do not think that the Allies would have done so well without me. You could argue that the USSR was locked in really well this game, but I would believe that because I was drawing so many troops away from the eastern border, that is the reason that the Germans fell, not because of the Soviets' own competence. But anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and now you get your reward of a dog.